Hey there. Welcome back. Tonight, we're taking a gentle journey into the past, into the quieter, slower celebrations of Christmas as they once were. Not the Christmas of crowded shopping centres or flashing lights, but the Christmas of candlelit rooms, of kissing boughs hanging from beamed ceilings, of Twelfth Night cakes shared among families who hadn't seen electric light or heard a radio. Before you settle in, if you're enjoying these quiet trips through history, you might want to like this video and subscribe to the channel. But only if you'd like to. No pressure. And if you feel like it, leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is where you are. It's always nice to know who's joining us on these slow wanderings through the centuries. Now get comfortable, adjust your pillows. Maybe dim the lights a little more. Let your breathing slow down. We're going to spend the next few hours together, exploring the Christmas traditions of the Georgian era. Those curious customs that have mostly faded away, replaced by newer things. We'll talk about kissing boughs and how they were made, berry by berry. We'll discuss the elaborate Twelfth Night cakes that took days to prepare. We'll wander through the 12 days of Christmas as they were actually celebrated, not in the song, but in the homes of people who lived 200-300 years ago. There's no rush tonight. We have all the time in the world. So let's begin, slowly, quietly, in a Georgian home on a cold December evening in 1700 and something. Imagine it's December the 6th, 1785. You're in a moderately well-to-do Georgian household somewhere in England. Perhaps Gloucestershire, perhaps Kent. The exact location doesn't matter so much. What matters is the feeling of the house as Christmas approaches. Because Christmas in the Georgian era, particularly in the late 18th century, wasn't just a single day. It was a season. A long gradual unfolding that began on St. Nicholas Day, December the 6th, and stretched all the way to Twelfth Night on January the 6th. Think about that for a moment. A full month of Christmas. Not the frantic, compressed celebration we know now, but something that moved at the pace of winter itself, slow, deliberate, with time to breathe between each festive event. On this particular December morning, the household is just beginning to stir. The fire in the kitchen has been lit for an hour already. The cook, a stout woman named Mrs. Bridges, let's call her, has been up since before dawn. Her hands are red from the cold as she kneads bread dough on the worn wooden table. The kitchen smells of yeast and wood smoke, and the faint, pleasant staleness of flour that's been stored in sacks since harvest. The master of the house, Mr. Thomas Hartwell, a merchant of comfortable means, but not extravagant wealth, comes down the stairs in his morning coat. His wig isn't on yet. He'll put that on later, after breakfast. For now, his own greying hair is visible, slightly flattened on one side from sleep. He's thinking about the letters he needs to write today, the accounts he needs to settle before the year ends. But he's also thinking about Christmas, because today is St. Nicholas Day, and that means the Christmas season has officially begun. His wife, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, will expect certain preparations to start. The servants will need instruction. And there's the matter of the kissing bough. Ah, the kissing bough. Let's pause here and really think about what this was, because it's one of those Georgian Christmas traditions that's almost entirely forgotten now, replaced by mistletoe sprigs you can buy in shops, or by Christmas trees hung with electric lights. A kissing bough was a decoration, yes, but it was so much more than that. It was a centerpiece, a focal point. In homes that couldn't afford or hadn't yet adopted the German custom of the Christmas tree, which wouldn't become popular in England until Queen Victoria and Prince Albert made it fashionable in the 1840s. The kissing bough was the heart of Christmas decoration. Picture a circular frame. Sometimes it was made from bent willow branches, flexible and green. Sometimes from wire, if the household was wealthy enough to afford it. This frame might be 2 feet across, maybe 3. It would be constructed carefully, usually by the men of the household or by a skilled servant, bent into perfect roundness and secured with twine. And then the decoration would begin. This wasn't something you rushed. This was an art. First, you'd weave in the evergreens. Holly, with its glossy dark leaves and bright red berries. Ivy, trailing and ancient, associated with winter survival, since before Christianity came to these islands. Rosemary for remembrance, its needle-like leaves releasing their sharp, clean scent when you touch them. And mistletoe, of course. White-berried, mysterious, gathered from old oak trees if you were lucky enough to have them nearby. The process of making a kissing bough took hours. You'd start by securing the evergreen branches to the frame, layering them thickly so no bare wood or wire showed through. Your fingers would grow sticky with pine sap. The sharp points of holly would prick your hands if you weren't careful. The smell would be overwhelming, in a good way. That deep green scent that fills your nose and seems to clear your head. As you worked, you'd add other decorations. Ribbons, if you had them. Red ones were traditional, but any color would do. You would tie them into bows and tuck them among the greenery. Apples, small and red, would be pushed into the branches, their polished skins catching the firelight. Oranges, too, if the household could afford such an exotic luxury. An orange from Spain or the Mediterranean, rare and expensive. Its bright color a shock against the dark green. You'd stud these oranges with cloves, pushing the dried flower buds into the thick peel until the whole fruit was covered, creating pomanders that would scent the room with their spicy sweetness for weeks. And candles. Small candles would be fixed to the frame, usually 4 or 6 of them, placed carefully so they wouldn't set the greenery alight. These would be lit on special occasions, turning the kissing bough into a chandelier of sorts, a glowing sphere of light and life in the dark winter room. At the very center of the kissing bough, hanging down from the middle of the frame on a ribbon, there would be something else, sometimes a bunch of mistletoe, fuller than the sprigs woven into the sides, sometimes an apple, sometimes a small decorated box, or a carved wooden ball. And this center decoration was important because it marked the spot, the place where the kissing would happen, because that was the point, you see. The kissing bough wasn't just decorative, it was functional, it was social. It was part of the courtship rituals and the flirtations that made Georgian Christmas parties so lively. When you hung a kissing bough in your parlor or drawing room, you were signaling that your home was ready for celebration, for guests, for the kind of cheerful merrymaking that the season allowed. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. It's still only December the 6th, and the kissing bough won't be hung until closer to Christmas Day itself. Right now, it's just an idea in Mrs. Hartwell's mind as she consults with her husband over breakfast. Their breakfast is simple. Porridge made from oats, with a splash of cream if the dairy has been generous. Bread still warm from the oven, with butter and perhaps some preserved jam from last summer's strawberries. Tea, of course, though it's expensive, and Mrs. Hartwell measures the leaves carefully. Mr. Hartwell would prefer coffee, but that's even more dear. And tea has become the English thing to drink, so tea it is. They eat in the small breakfast room, not the formal dining room. That room is cold this time of year anyway, and it won't be used except for Sunday dinners and special occasions until the Christmas entertaining begins. The breakfast room is warmer, closer to the kitchen, and the winter sun, pale and tentative, comes through the window and falls across the table. Mrs. Hartwell is making lists in her head. The first list is of all the greenery they'll need to gather. Not just for the kissing bough, but for decorating the whole house. Garlands for the stairs, wreaths for the doors, sprigs of holly for the mantelpiece. It's a considerable amount of gathering, and it will need to be done on Christmas Eve itself, not before. To bring greenery into the house before Christmas Eve was considered very unlucky in Georgian times. The superstition was old, older than anyone could remember, but it was taken seriously. Wait until Christmas Eve, not a day earlier. Her second list is of foodstuffs. Christmas in a Georgian household meant feasting, and feasting meant planning. There would need to be a turkey, or possibly a goose, which was more traditional and less expensive. The butcher would need to be consulted. Arrangements would need to be made. And then there were all the other things. The mince pies, dozens of them, small and rich, and filled with a mixture that still contained actual meat, along with the fruits and spices. The Christmas pudding, which would need to be made well in advance and then steamed for hours. The 12th Night cake, the grandest thing of all, which wouldn't be needed until January the 6th, but which required so much preparation that you had to start thinking about it now. And there were the servants to consider. Mrs. Hartwell employed 4 live-in servants. Sarah, the housemaid, who was 16, and whose main job was cleaning and helping in the kitchen. James, the footman, who was 18 and handled the heavier work. Tended to the horses, and served at table when they had guests. Mrs. Bridges, the cook, who was 40-something and had been with the family for years. And little Tom, who was 12 and who helped wherever he was needed. Mostly in the stables and garden, but sometimes in the house if James needed an extra pair of hands. It was customary to give these servants special treatment at Christmas. Extra food, small gifts, usually practical things like warm gloves or a few coins. Christmas Day itself off, or at least part of it, so they could attend a church and have their own celebrations. This was expected. It was part of the social contract between master and servant. You treated your people well at Christmas, and they remained loyal and worked hard the rest of the year. Mr. Hartwell finishes his tea and excuses himself. He has business in town today. Accounts to settle, as mentioned. Perhaps some shopping to do, gifts to purchase for his wife and children. The Hartwells have 3 children, by the way. 2 daughters and a son. Mary, who is 14. Elizabeth, who is 11. And George, who is 9. They're still asleep upstairs. They'll be down in an hour or so for their own breakfast. And then there will be lessons with the governess, as there are every weekday. Mrs. Hartwell remains at the table for a few more minutes after her husband leaves. She's thinking about the shape of the next month, the way it will unfold, the gradual building of festivity from this quiet December morning to the grand finale of Twelfth Night. It's a shape she knows well, has known since she was a child in her own parents' home. The rhythm of Georgian Christmas is as familiar to her as the rhythm of the seasons themselves. Later that morning, after the breakfast, things have been cleared away. Mrs. Hartwell goes to the drawing room and begins to think about where the kissing boughs should hang. The drawing room is the finest room in the house. It's where they receive guests, where the family gathers in the evenings. The walls are papered in a pale blue pattern of flowers and vines. The furniture is good quality, but not ostentatious. 2 sofas upholstered in green damask, several chairs, a pianoforte in one corner, which Elizabeth has been learning to play, a fireplace with a marble surround, and above it, a mirror in a gilded frame. The ceiling is perhaps 10 feet high, and from it, right in the center of the room, there's a hook. It's been there for years, used every December for the same purpose. The kissing bough will hang from that hook, suspended in the middle of the room so that people can walk beneath it, can stand beneath it, can engage in the playful custom that gives the decoration its name. Let's move forward now. Let's say it's December the 23rd. We've skipped ahead a bit, but these quiet middle weeks of December don't hold as much activity anyway. The preparations have been continuing. Mrs. Hartwell has been consulting with Mrs. Bridges about menus. The children have been making small gifts for their parents and for each other, spending their afternoons cutting paper and gluing and sewing with more enthusiasm than skill. Mr. Hartwell has made his purchases in town, and these are now hidden away in his study, waiting for Christmas Day. The weather has turned colder. There was frost this morning when Sarah went out to the well, a thick white coating on the grass and on the bare branches of the trees. The sky is that peculiar grey-white of late December, heavy with the possibility of snow, but not quite delivering it. Inside the house, fires burn in most of the main rooms now. The cost of coal is considerable, but it's Christmas, and you can't have your family and guests shivering. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve, and that's when the real work begins. But today, December the 23rd, is a day for final preparations. Mr. Hartwell has given James and young Tom their instructions. Tomorrow morning at first light, they're to go out to the woods at the edge of the Hartwell property, and they're to gather greenery. Lots of it. Holly, ivy, whatever evergreens they can find. They should take a cart and fill it completely, and they should look for good specimens, full branches. Lots of berries on the holly. This is important. The greenery is what will transform the house from its everyday appearance into its Christmas appearance. Mrs. Bridges, meanwhile, is in the kitchen, surrounded by what looks like chaos, but is actually a very organized sort of chaos. She's been baking for days. The mince pies are done, dozens of them, cooled and stored in the larder. The Christmas pudding was made weeks ago and has been sitting in its cloth, its flavors melding and deepening. But there's still so much to do. She's making marchpane. Right now, which is what the Georgians called marzipan. It's a paste made from ground almonds and sugar, incredibly sweet and rich. She's been pounding almonds in a mortar for what feels like hours, and her arm aches. The almonds have to be ground to a perfect powder, not a single graininess left, or the marchpane won't be smooth. Once she has her almond powder, she'll mix it with sugar and rosewater and knead it into a paste that's pliable like clay. This marchpane will be used to decorate the Twelfth Night cake, molded into shapes, into figures, into little ornaments that will sit on top of the cake's white sugar coating. But the Twelfth Night cake itself won't be made for another week or so. Too early, and it will go stale before Twelfth Night arrives. The marchpane, though, that can be made now and kept in an airtight tin. Sarah comes into the kitchen to help. She's been doing the washing, and her hands are red and chapped from the lye soap and cold water. Mrs. Bridges gives her the slightly kinder job of stirring the posset that's warming on the stove. Posset is a drink, hot and sweet and creamy, made from milk curdled with ale or wine and flavoured with sugar and spices. It's what wealthy Georgians drink on cold evenings, and it's what will be served to any Christmas visitors. The posset needs constant stirring so it doesn't burn, and Sarah takes up the long wooden spoon and stirs, round and round, while Mrs. Bridges continues pounding almonds. They work in companionable silence for a while. The kitchen is warm, almost hot, from the great fire that's been burning all day in the cooking hearth. Pots hang from iron hooks above the flames. The work table in the centre of the room is covered in flour dust, in smears of butter, in the debris of constant baking. This is the heart of the house right now. Everything else is peripheral. Here, in the kitchen, is where Christmas is being made. Mrs. Hartwell comes in briefly to inspect progress. She tastes the posset, declares it needs a touch more sugar, and watches as Sarah adds another spoonful. She asks Mrs. Bridges about the turkey. Yes, it's been arranged. The butcher will deliver it tomorrow, Christmas Eve, and it will be hung in the coal larder until it's time to roast it on Christmas Day. How large is it? Oh, large enough for the family and a few guests. If guests arrive. In Georgian England, you never quite knew who might show up at Christmas. The roads were difficult, travel was slow and uncertain. But people tried to get home for Christmas if they possibly could. There was always the chance that a relative might appear at the door. Having made the journey from London or from wherever they'd been staying, and you had to be ready to welcome them. That evening, after supper, the family gathers in the drawing room. The children are excited. You can see it in the way they fidget, in the way they whisper to each other. George, the 9-year-old, keeps going to the window and looking out at the dark garden, as if expecting something to appear there. Mary, the eldest, is more composed, as 14-year-olds try to be. But she's excited too. She's been allowed to stay up later than usual these past few nights, as a special Christmas privilege, and she's enjoying the feeling of being almost grown up, almost part of the adult world. Mr. Hartwell sits in his usual chair by the fire, reading the newspaper. Mrs. Hartwell is doing needlework, a piece of embroidery that she's been working on for months and that she wants to finish before the new year. The children are supposed to be reading or practicing their lessons, but really they're just waiting for tomorrow. Tomorrow is when everything will change. Tomorrow, Christmas Eve, is when the house will be transformed. And they're all waiting for it. Even Mr. Hartwell behind his newspaper. Even Mrs. Hartwell with her calm, methodical stitching. Everyone is waiting. Christmas Eve. Morning arrives cold and clear. The threatened snow has not materialized, but the ground is hard with frost, and the bare trees stand out stark against the pale sky. James and Tom are up before sunrise, loading the cart with tools. They'll need a saw for cutting larger branches, a knife for harvesting ivy, thick gloves to protect their hands from holly pricks, sacks to carry their harvest. They set off just as the sun is rising, a weak winter sun that gives light but little warmth. The cart rattles over the frozen ruts in the lane. Their breath makes clouds in the cold air. Tom is talking, chattering about Christmas and gifts and the goose they'll have in the servants' hall. But James is quiet, concentrating on guiding the horse along the rough track that leads to the woodland. The woods are beautiful in winter, in their own stark way. The deciduous trees are bare, their branches making intricate patterns against the sky. But scattered among them are the evergreens. Holly trees, their leaves glossy and dark. Ivy climbing the trunks of the oaks. And here and there, if you know where to look, patches of mistletoe growing high in the branches of the older trees, mysterious and parasitic and sacred. They work for several hours. James does most of the cutting. He's strong and skilled with the saw, and he knows how to take branches without damaging the trees themselves. You don't want to kill the holly. You'll need it again next year. So you cut carefully, taking only what you need, leaving enough growth that the tree will recover. Tom's job is to gather what James cuts and to load it into the cart. He also searches for ivy, pulling down long trailing vines from where they climb the tree trunks. Ivy is easier than holly, no sharp leaves to contend with, just the leathery green leaves that stay green all winter long. The mistletoe is more difficult. It grows high up, often beyond easy reach. James has to climb, using the lower branches like ladder rungs, pulling himself up into the tree until he can reach the pale green clumps of mistletoe. It's dangerous work. One slip and he could fall, could break an arm or a leg or worse. But he's done this before. Many Christmases before. And he's careful. He saws through the mistletoe's attachment to the tree branch, and the clump falls down. Tom catches it if he can, or picks it up from the ground if he can't. By midday, the cart is full. They've gathered an impressive amount. Enough holly to garland all the stairs and festoon the mantelpieces. Enough ivy to twine around door frames and window frames. Enough mistletoe for the kissing bough and for sprigs to place in other parts of the house. They head back, the cart now much heavier, the horse pulling steadily. Tom is cold, despite his work. His fingers are numb inside his gloves and his nose is running. But he's happy. There's something satisfying about the cart full of greenery, about the successful completion of a job well done. When they arrive back at the house, there's a flurry of activity. Mrs. Hartwell comes out to inspect their harvest. She's pleased. They've done well. She directs them to unload the greenery in the stable yard, where it will wait until this evening. Because remember, the superstition. You can gather the greenery on Christmas Eve, but you shouldn't bring it into the house itself until later. Some families waited until nightfall. Some brought it in after the Christmas Eve church service. The exact timing varied from household to household, but the principle was the same. Don't be too hasty. Respect the old customs. The afternoon passes in a rush of final preparations. The house is cleaned to perfection, every room swept and dusted. The good china is brought out from the cupboards where it lives most of the year, and Sarah washes each piece carefully in warm water. The silver is polished until it gleams. The table in the dining room is set with the best linen, pressed smooth and white. In the kitchen, Mrs. Bridges is working on the turkey. It arrived from the butcher as promised. A fine bird, already plucked, but not yet prepared for roasting. She has to stuff it with a mixture of breadcrumbs and herbs and chopped onions, pushing the stuffing into the bird's cavity, and then sewing it shut with kitchen twine. It's messy work, and by the time she's done, her hands are greasy, and she wipes them on her apron, which is already filthy from the day's labours. The turkey will roast tomorrow, slowly for hours, basted regularly, with its own juices and with butter. The skin will turn golden and crispy. The meat will be tender and rich. But that's tomorrow's concern. Today she just needs to get it prepared and into the coal larder where it will stay overnight. As evening approaches, the family prepares for church. Christmas Eve service is important. Even if you're not particularly devout, you go to church on Christmas Eve. It's expected. It's part of the fabric of community life. Everyone will be there. The squire and his family in their fine clothes. The tenant farmers and their wives. The village tradesmen. The servants in their church-going best. All gathered together in the parish church to sing hymns and hear the Christmas story read aloud. The Hartwell family dresses in their good clothes. Mr. Hartwell in his dark coat and breeches, his best wig carefully powdered. Mrs. Hartwell in a gown of deep green wool, with a shawl for warmth. The children scrubbed and neat. The girls in their best dresses. George in a miniature version of his father's outfit. They walk to the church, which is half a mile away through the village. The evening is cold and their breath makes clouds. But the walk is familiar, and they've made it countless times. The church is cold too. Churches always are in winter. There's no heating beyond the warmth of many bodies pressed together. But there are candles, dozens of them, creating pools of warm light. And there's the sense of occasion, of specialness, that makes the cold bearable. The service proceeds in its familiar pattern. Hymns are sung, though not what we'd call Christmas carols. Those are still a relatively rare thing in the 1780s. But there are hymns, solemn and beautiful. The vicar reads from the Gospel of Luke, the Nativity story, the journey to Bethlehem, the birth in the stable, the angels and the shepherds. His voice echoes in the stone space of the church. The congregation listens. Some are paying close attention. Others are thinking about their dinners tomorrow, about their gifts, about the secular pleasures of Christmas alongside the sacred ones. After the service, there's a general milling about outside the church. Greetings are exchanged, plans for the next few days are discussed. Invitations are given and accepted. Come to us on the second day of Christmas. We're having a few people over on 12th Night. You must join us. The Hartwells walk home through the now dark evening. The stars are out, brilliant in the cold, clear sky. Orion the hunter stands above the southern horizon. The Pleiades cluster like a tiny handful of diamonds. George points them out, showing off the astronomy he's been learning from his tutor, and Mr. Hartwell grunts approvingly. When they arrive home, it's time. The greenery can now come into the house. This is when the transformation happens, when the ordinary Georgian townhouse becomes a Christmas house. James and Tom bring in the branches of holly and ivy. The family helps. Even Mr. Hartwell, who usually leaves such domestic matters to his wife and servants, gets involved. It's a communal activity, a family activity. Mary and Elizabeth take the ivy and begin to twine it around the banister of the staircase, winding the long stems through the rails, letting the leaves trail down. Mrs. Hartwell arranges holly on the mantelpiece in the drawing room, the bright red berries cheerful against the dark leaves. Sprigs of holly go above doorways, tucked into the frames. More ivy is draped across the tops of picture frames, around the mirror, in the hallway. And then there's the kissing bough. This is the centerpiece, the main event. Mr. Hartwell has already constructed the frame earlier in the week, though it's been kept out of sight until now. He brings it out. a perfect circle of bent wood about 3 feet across. Now the decoration begins. The whole family participates. Mrs. Hartwell takes charge, but everyone helps. Holly and ivy and rosemary are woven into the frame, layer upon layer, until no bare wood shows. The mistletoe is added, hung in the center. The oranges, studded with cloves, are attached with ribbon. Apples are pushed into the greenery. Red ribbons are tied in bows. The children squabble gently over who gets to place which decoration where. It takes an hour, maybe more. Time loses its meaning in the warm candlelit room. In the focus on this one perfect thing they're creating together, the smell is overwhelming. The sharp green scent of the evergreens, the spice of the cloves, the sweet orange peel, the aromatic rosemary. It fills the room, fills your nose, seems to fill your whole head, until you can't smell anything else. Finally is done. The kissing bough is complete, heavy with decoration, beautiful in its lush greenness. Mr. Hartwell and James carefully carry it to the center of the drawing room. There's a step-ladder kept for such purposes. James climbs up, and with Mr. Hartwell's help, they attach the kissing bough to the ceiling hook. It hangs there, suspended, turning very slowly in the slight draft that's always present in these old houses. The candles will be added later, just before guests arrive. For now, it hangs unlit, but perfect. The family stands back and admires their work. Elizabeth claps her hands together with delight. George is already thinking about the game that the kissing bough enables. He's 9, still too young to be interested in kissing. But he understands that there's something exciting about standing under the decorated bough, about the permission it gives for certain behaviors that would normally be forbidden. Mary, at 14, is old enough to feel a flutter of something she doesn't quite understand when she looks at the kissing bough. Next week, when they have guests, when there are young men present, sons of neighboring families, that bough will mean something more. But for now, it's just beautiful. Mrs. Hartwell is satisfied. The house is ready. The food is prepared, or nearly so. The presents are wrapped. The decorations are hung. Tomorrow will be Christmas Day, and everything is as it should be. Christmas Day dawns cold but bright. The sun rises over the frost-covered fields, turning the white grass golden. Inside the Hartwell house, there's a moment of perfect quiet before the day begins. Then, gradually, the household stirs. The servants are up first, as always. Mrs. Bridges starts the kitchen fire, while Sarah fills kettles with water from the pump in the yard. James brings in more coal for all the various fires that will need to be kept burning throughout the day. Little Tom feeds the horses and the chickens, his usual morning chores that don't stop even for Christmas. But there's something different about this Christmas morning, a lighter feeling. Because later, after the main work is done, they'll have their own feast in the servants' hall, and they've been given small gifts by the Hartwells. Nothing extravagant. For Sarah, a pair of warm gloves and a shilling. For James, a new shirt and 2 shillings. For Mrs. Bridges, a length of good woolen fabric that she can have made into a dress and half a crown. For Tom, a pocket knife and 6pence. These aren't wrapped beautifully. They're practical gifts, but they're appreciated. They represent thought, consideration, the acknowledgement that these servants are part of the household, part of the extended family in the way that good servants always were in this era. Upstairs, the Hartwell children are awake far earlier than usual. They've been told to stay in their rooms until called, but you can hear them moving around, whispering excitedly to each other through the walls. Finally, at a reasonable hour, they're allowed downstairs. The presents in a Georgian household aren't what we'd expect. There's no pile of wrapped packages under a tree. Remember, there is no tree. Instead, presents are exchanged more informally, usually at breakfast or shortly after. They're often useful things. Books, handkerchiefs, small pieces of jewellery for the girls. A new pocket watch for George, which makes him feel very grown up indeed. Mrs. Hartwell gives her husband a waistcoat that she's been embroidering in secret for months, worked in silk thread with a subtle pattern of leaves. He's genuinely pleased. It's beautiful, and it must have taken hours of work. He gives her a pair of kid leather gloves, soft as butter, and a silver brooch in the shape of a flower. The children give their parents small things they've made. A drawing, a bookmark, a pincushion stitched somewhat crookedly, but with evident love. It's all very gentle, very understated compared to modern Christmas mornings. There's no frenzy of tearing through wrapping paper. Things are given and received calmly, with genuine appreciation. The focus isn't on the accumulation of things, but on the thoughtfulness behind each gift. After presents, there's breakfast. But not the usual breakfast. Today there's toast with jam and honey, cold meats left over from previous days, fruit preserves, and hot chocolate, which is an incredible luxury. The chocolate is made from a block of solid cacao, grated into hot milk and sweetened with sugar. It's rich and bittersweet and warming, and the children especially love it. Then it's time to prepare for church. The Christmas Day service is even more important than the Christmas Eve one. The family dresses again in their good clothes and walks through the village to the church. More people are there today. The pews are packed. Everyone who can possibly attend is attending. The service is longer today. More hymns, more prayers, another reading of the Nativity. A sermon from the vicar about charity and goodwill and the meaning of Christmas. Some of the congregation are paying close attention. Others are thinking about their dinners, which are cooking even now in kitchens across the village, tended by servants who stayed home for this purpose. When the service ends, the Hartwells walk home through the midday brightness. The sun is at its highest point, though it's still low in the winter sky. Their shadows stretch long across the frozen ground. At home, the house smells glorious. Mrs. Bridges has been cooking all morning. The turkey is roasting, its skin already golden fat dripping down into the pan beneath where potatoes are turning crispy and brown. There are other dishes in various stages of preparation. A soup to start with. Vegetables boiled in water until they're soft. The mince pies, reheated until their crusts are flaky and warm. Dinner is served in the early afternoon, perhaps 2 o'clock or so. The family gathers in the dining room, which is warm from the fire and beautiful with its decorations. The table is set with the good china and the polished silver. Candles are lit even though it's still daylight, because this is a feast. And feasts require candles. The meal proceeds through multiple courses. First, the soup, a clear broth with pieces of vegetable floating in it. Then the turkey, brought to the table whole, its golden skin glistening. Mr. Hartwell carves, slicing the white breast meat carefully, then the darker meat from the legs and thighs. Each person gets a generous portion, along with stuffing and potatoes and vegetables. They eat slowly, savoring each bite. There's conversation, but not constant conversation. Long pauses where the only sound is the clink of cutlery on china, the crackle of the fire. This is what Georgian Christmas dinner was like. Not rushed, not loud, but measured and appreciative. After the turkey comes the Christmas pudding. It's brought in ceremoniously, still steaming from its final warming. Mrs. Bridges has poured brandy over it and set it alight, so it arrives at the table crowned with blue flames that dance and flicker before gradually dying away. The pudding is dense and dark, studded with currants and raisins, rich with suet and spices. Each person gets a thick slice, served with a custard sauce. By the time the meal is finished, everyone is comfortably full. Not stuffed, not overfull in that uncomfortable way, but satisfied. The kind of full that makes you want to sit by the fire and doze. And that's more or less what happens. The afternoon passes quietly. Mr. Hartwell reads. Mrs. Hartwell does her needlework. The children play with their new things, or just sit and stare into the fire. Outside, the winter day fades into evening. The sun sets early, around 4 o'clock, and the world beyond the windows turns dark. There's a light supper in the evening. Nothing elaborate. Cold meat and cheese and bread. The leftover mince pies. Tea. And then, as the house grows quiet, as the children are sent up to bed, the first day of Christmas is over. But remember, Christmas in the Georgian era isn't just one day. It's 12 days. We're only at the beginning. The days after Christmas blend together in a pleasant sort of way. December the 26th, which we now call Boxing Day, would not have been called that in the 1780s. The term hadn't come into use yet, but the custom that gave rise to the name was already well established. This was the day when servants and tradespeople received their Christmas boxes, their gifts of money or food from the families they served. For the Hartwell servants, who have already received their gifts on Christmas Day itself, the 26th is a day of relative rest. They still have their duties, of course. The fires still need tending. The meals still need preparing. But there's a lighter feel to everything. The pressure of preparing for Christmas is over. Now there's just the gentle coast through the 12 days until Twelfth Night. On the second day of Christmas, the 27th, the Hartwells have visitors. This is common during the Christmas season. Families visit back and forth. Friends drop by for tea or for dinner. The isolation that characterizes the rest of the winter, when travel is difficult and people tend to stay home, is temporarily suspended. For these 12 days, despite the cold, despite the short daylight hours, people move between houses, maintaining and strengthening the social bonds that hold rural English society together. The visitors today are the Thorntons, a family from the next village over. Mr. Thornton is a gentleman farmer, a man of Mr. Hartwell's approximate social standing. Mrs. Thornton is a cheerful, plump woman who talks constantly about very little. They have 2 children with them. A son, Henry, who is 15, and who affects a worldly air that doesn't quite cover his essential boyishness. And a daughter, Catherine, who is 13 and painfully shy. The Thorntons arrive in mid-afternoon, their carriage pulling up in front of the house. There's a flurry of greetings. Cloaks and coats are taken. The guests are ushered into the drawing room, where the fire has been built up, and the room is warm and welcoming. The kissing bough hangs in its place, its greenery still fresh, its candles now lit for the first time, sending soft light across the room. tea is served. Not the simple tea of breakfast, but an elaborate afternoon tea with all the trimmings. There are sandwiches, thin slices of bread with butter and watercress or cold meat. There are cakes, small and iced. There are the mince pies, naturally. There are biscuits and preserves. The women serve while the men talk. Mr. Hartwell and Mr. Thornton discuss farming matters. The price of wheat, the state of the roads, the ever-interesting topic of the weather. Mrs. Hartwell and Mrs. Thornton talk about their children, about mutual acquaintances, about plans for the rest of the season. Will the Thorntons be in London for part of the spring social season? Yes, they will, if they can afford it. The girls are getting to an age where they need to be introduced to society, need to start attending balls and dinners where they might meet suitable young men. And what about the Hartwells? Mrs. Hartwell sighs. She's not sure. London is expensive, and Mary is only 14. Perhaps next year would be better. The children are less interested in adult conversation. After tea, they're allowed to go to the music room, where Elizabeth shows Catherine the pianoforte and attempts to teach her a simple tune. George and Henry. With that awkwardness that exists between boys of different ages, don't quite know what to do with each other at first. But eventually they start a game of drafts, and that occupies them. Mary, the eldest Hartwell daughter, finds herself in an interesting position. She's too old to be really comfortable playing with the younger children, but too young to sit with the adults without feeling awkward. She ends up hovering somewhere in between, helping Sarah bring in more tea things, then sitting at the edge of the adult conversation, then wandering back to check on her siblings. As the afternoon fades into evening, someone suggests a game. Games are a big part of Georgian Christmas entertaining. Not video games or board games in the modern sense, but social games. Parlor games. Things that involve the whole party and that create laughter and a sense of occasion. The game they choose is Snapdragon. This is a game that will be familiar to people who have read about Georgian Christmas customs, though it sounds absolutely terrifying to modern sensibilities. Here's how it works. You take a wide, shallow bowl or dish. Into this dish you put raisins. Lots of raisins. Then you pour brandy over the raisins, enough to cover them. Then, and this is the part that seems insane, you set the brandy on fire. The bowl now contains burning brandy and raisins. The flames are blue and orange, dancing and flickering. The brandy burns with a hot, fierce heat, and you can feel the warmth of it from several feet away. And the game is to reach into the bowl through the flames and snatch out a raisin. You're supposed to do it quickly, so your fingers don't get burned. You're supposed to be brave and skilled. And then, with your fingers stinging from the heat, you pop the raisin into your mouth, where it's still warm from the brandy fire, and you chew and swallow. It's a game that requires dim lighting to be really effective. The flames show up better in the dark, so the candles in the drawing room are extinguished, and the fire in the fireplace is allowed to die down a bit. The room is lit now only by the flames of the Snapdragon bowl, casting strange shadows on the walls, on the faces of the players. The adults go first to show the children how it's done. Mr. Hartwell reaches in, winces slightly at the heat, grabs a raisin and pops it in his mouth with a triumphant grin. Mrs. Thornton goes next, more cautiously, but she gets her raisin. Then it's the children's turn. Henry, trying to impress, reaches in boldly and comes up with 2 raisins, which earns him applause. Mary is more careful, her hand hovering over the flames before darting in quickly. She gets her raisin and pulls back fast, her fingers red but not burned. The game continues until all the raisins are gone and the brandy burns itself out. Everyone's fingers are warm, tingling slightly from the heat. There's the smell of alcohol and burnt sugar in the air. And there's laughter. The slightly nervous laughter that comes from having just done something mildly dangerous for the sake of entertainment. The Thorntons leave as full darkness falls. There are more rounds of farewells, promises to visit again before the season ends. The children are particularly effusive in their goodbyes, having discovered that they enjoy each other's company. Perhaps Henry can come stay for a few days in the new year. Yes, perhaps he can. That will be lovely. And then the Thorntons are gone, their carriage rattling away into the night, and the Hartwell house settles back into its quieter rhythm. This is what the days after Christmas were like. A succession of visits and small gatherings. Dinners that went on for hours. Card games and parlour games. Conversations by firelight. The gentle consumption of food and drink. The gradual working through the festive season toward its culmination on Twelfth Night. Let's move forward again. Let's say it's now the 3rd of January. We're well into the Christmas season now. The greenery that was so fresh on Christmas Eve is starting to look a bit tired. The holly leaves are beginning to curl slightly at their edges. A few of the berries have dropped off. The ivy is still green, but it's lost some of its glossiness. The kissing bough hangs as it has hung for 10 days now, still beautiful, but showing the signs of time. In 2 days, on January the 6th, it will be Twelfth Night. This is the grand finale, the end of the Christmas season. And the main event of Twelfth Night is the Twelfth Night cake. This is not like a modern Christmas cake, though there are similarities. The Twelfth Night cake is something specific, something elaborate, something that requires days of preparation. Mrs. Bridges has been working on it since yesterday. The cake itself is a fruit cake, dense and rich. But it's what goes on top of the cake that makes it special. First, there's a layer of marchpane, that almond paste she made back before Christmas. This marchpane is rolled out flat, like pastry, and laid over the top and sides of the cake, covering it completely in a smooth layer of pale cream-coloured sweetness. Then comes the icing. Royal icing, made from egg whites and powdered sugar, beaten until it's thick and white and glossy. This is spread over the marchpane in a layer so white it almost glows. It's smooth as plaster, and when it dries, it will be hard enough to hold decorations. And the decorations are the final touch. Mrs. Bridges has been making these from marchpane and sugar paste. Little figures, moulded and painted. Here's a shepherdess with her crook. Here's a tiny sheep, no bigger than a walnut. Here are flowers, roses and lilies, their petals tinted with the vegetable dyes. Here's a little castle made from sugar, its towers and walls delicate as lace. All of these will be arranged on top of the cake, creating a scene. A tiny world made of sugar and almonds. It takes her all day on January the 4th to assemble and decorate the cake. Her hands are sticky with sugar. Her back aches from bending over the work table. But when she's done, when she stands back and looks at what she's created, there's a sense of satisfaction. The cake is beautiful. It's a work of art, really. Too beautiful to eat, except that on Twelfth Night, it will be eaten. Every guest will get a slice. That's the point. There's another tradition associated with the Twelfth Night cake, an old one that's starting to fade even in the 1780s, but that some households still observe. Inside the cake, baked right into it, there are two things: a dried bean and a dried pea. When the cake is sliced and served, two people will find these items in their slices. The man who gets the bean becomes the king of the evening. The woman who gets the pea becomes the queen. And they will preside over the Twelfth Night party, wearing paper crowns, making mock proclamations, generally acting as the centers of attention and merriment. It's a silly tradition, really. A holdover from medieval times, from the old tradition of the Lord of Misrule. But it's fun. And Twelfth Night is supposed to be fun. A last burst of festivity, before the long quiet of winter sets back in. On the afternoon of January the 5th, the Hartwells make their final preparations for Twelfth Night. The house is cleaned again, though it's been kept reasonably clean throughout the season. The drawing room is tidied. Fresh candles are put in all the candlesticks. The best wine is brought up from the cellar. There will be a party tomorrow evening. Not a small, intimate gathering like the visit from the Thorntons, but a proper party with perhaps 20 guests. Invitations have been sent out days ago, of course. Notes delivered by hand to neighbouring families, inviting them to attend the Hartwells' 12th Night celebration. Most have accepted. It will be quite a crowd. The drawing room will be packed with people. There will be noise and laughter and music and games. Mrs. Hartwell is looking forward to it, and also slightly dreading it. These large gatherings are wonderful, but also exhausting. So much coordination is required. So much food needs to be prepared. So many details need to be managed. She's been making lists for days. What dishes will be served? Where people will sit? How the evening will proceed? But she's also excited. Twelfth Night is the climax of the season. It's the last chance for gaiety before the long stretch of winter. And there's something about a house full of people, about candlelight and music and laughter, that makes all the work worthwhile. Evening arrives on January the 5th, and the Hartwells have a quiet family dinner. Tomorrow will be chaos, but tonight is peaceful. They eat their meal, talk about the party preparations, and then retire early. Everyone needs to be rested for tomorrow. 12th Night, January the 6th, 1786, the final day of Christmas. The house has been in a state of controlled chaos since early morning. Mrs. Bridges and Sarah have been working non-stop, preparing food, mountains of the food. Small savoury pastries filled with meat and cheese, sliced cold meats arranged on platters, bread cut into thin slices and buttered, bowls of nuts, plates of fruit preserves, and the cakes. The Twelfth Night cake, of course, but also other cakes, smaller cakes, biscuits. Everything sweet that could possibly be baked has been baked. James and Tom have been preparing the house itself. Extra chairs have been brought down from storage, carried down the narrow stairs from the attic. Tables have been set up in strategic locations to hold food and drinks. Every candle in the house has been lit, or will be lit as evening approaches. The fire in the drawing room has been built up until it's roaring, because there will be many people in the room, and they'll need the warmth. By early evening, everything is as ready as it can be. The food is arranged on tables in the dining room and in the breakfast room. The drawing room is set up for entertaining, with chairs arranged in conversational groups, with space in the centre of the room for games or dancing. The kissing bough, looking perhaps a bit the worse for wear after nearly 2 weeks, has been refreshed as much as possible. New candles have been added, and a few fresh holly sprigs have been woven in to replace the ones that looked particularly sad. The Hartwell family dresses in their finest. This is a party after all. A proper party. Mrs. Hartwell wears a gown of blue silk that rustles when she walks. She's pinned her hair up high and powdered it lightly. She wears her good jewellery, the pearl necklace that was her mother's. Mr. Hartwell is in his best coat and breeches, his wig freshly powdered. The children are scrubbed and dressed in their party clothes, told to be on their best behaviour, warned not to make nuisances of themselves. The guests begin arriving around 7 o'clock. They come in carriages and on horseback, families from the surrounding countryside. The Thorntons are among the first to arrive, and Mrs. Thornton exclaims over how lovely the house looks. More families follow. The Ashworths, the Pembrokes, the Suttons. Names that meant something in this small corner of Georgian England, but that mean nothing now. Families that have vanished into the past, leaving perhaps a headstone or two in the village churchyard. By 8 o'clock the house is full. The drawing room is packed with people, with conversation, with laughter. The noise level is astonishing after the relative quiet of the past 2 weeks. Everyone is talking at once, it seems. Greetings are being called across the room. News is being exchanged. Who's engaged to whom? Who's expecting a child? Who's planning to go to Bath for the season? Food is served, though not in a formal way. It's more of a buffet, with people helping themselves. From the tables set up with all those platters and bowls. People balance plates on their laps, or stand holding them while they eat and talk. Wine flows freely. The wassail bowl, that large punch bowl filled with spiced wine and apples, is set up in the breakfast room, and people ladle cups of the sweet, warming drink. As the evening progresses, there are games. Someone suggests blind man's buff, and a handkerchief is produced to serve as a blindfold. A young man, one of the Thornton cousins visiting for the season, is blindfolded first. He's spun around 3 times until he's dizzy, and then released to stumble around the room trying to catch someone. People dodge and duck, laughing, calling out to him to mislead him about their location. Finally, he catches Mary Hartwell, who shrieks with surprise and then laughs. Now it's her turn to be blindfolded. The game continues for a while, but eventually interest wanes, and someone suggests music instead. Elizabeth is pressed into service at the pianoforte. She's nervous about performing in front of all these people, but she does her best, playing a simple piece she's been practicing. It's a bit fumbled in places, but everyone applauds kindly when she finishes. Then one of the guests, a young woman with a good voice, is persuaded to sing. She stands by the pianoforte, and Elizabeth plays an accompaniment while she sings a ballad about lost love and faraway places. Her voice is clear and sweet, and the room falls quiet, listening to her. There's something poignant about it, this moment of beauty in the midst of all the gaiety. After the singing, it's time for the main event. The 12th night, cake. Mrs. Bridges brings it in from the kitchen, carrying it carefully on its best platter. The cake is magnificent. The decorations catch the candlelight. The white icing gleams. There's a collective sound of appreciation from the guests. The cake is placed on a table in the center of the room. Mr. Hartwell, as the host, takes up the knife and begins to cut. Each slice must be cut carefully because somewhere in that cake are the bean and the pea. Who will get them? everyone is watching with interest. The slices are distributed. People take their pieces, break off chunks with their fingers, eat. The cake is incredibly rich. The almond marchpane and the thick icing combine with the dense fruit cake to create something almost overwhelming in its sweetness. But it's delicious. Everyone agrees it's delicious. And then there's a shout. One of the young men, a neighbor's son named Robert, has found the bean in his slice. He holds it up triumphantly. There's laughter and applause. Robert is proclaimed the 12th Night King. Someone produces a paper crown, painted gold, and he puts it on with exaggerated ceremony. A few minutes later, there's another shout. Catherine Thornton, the shy 13-year-old, has found the pea. She blushes furiously as everyone turns to look at her, but she's smiling too. She's the 12th Night Queen. Another paper crown is produced, and she puts it on, looking both embarrassed and pleased. For the rest of the evening, Robert and Catherine are the centers of attention. They're given places of honor. Mock proclamations are made. The king commands that everyone have more wine. The queen decrees that there shall be dancing. It's all silly and playful, but it's fun. It creates a structure for the rest of the evening, a focus. And there is dancing. The furniture in the drawing room is pushed back against the walls to create space. Someone with a fiddle is discovered among the guests, and he takes up his instrument. The music he plays is simple, country dance tunes, the kind that everyone knows. Couples form up and dance, their movements creating patterns on the floor, forward and back, circle left, circle right, hand over hand. It's not the refined dancing of London ballrooms, but it's energetic and joyful. The children are allowed to stay up far later than usual, and they run around the edges of the dancing, getting underfoot and being shooed away by the adults. The fire burns low and is built up again. More wine is drunk. More food is eaten, though by now most people are too full to eat much more. Gradually, as midnight approaches and then passes, people begin to make their farewells. The carriages are called for. Cloaks and coats are fetched. There are promises to write, to visit, to see each other in London perhaps if both families make it there for the season. The children are hugged and told how much they've grown. The hosts are thanked profusely for such a wonderful evening. By 1 in the morning, the last guests have gone. The house is suddenly quiet. The servants begin the work of cleaning up, though they're all exhausted. Tomorrow, or rather today, since it's already past midnight, there will be more cleaning. But the worst of it can be done now. Plates are stacked. Leftover food is carried back to the kitchen. Candles are blown out, leaving the rooms in darkness except for the dying light of the fires. The Hartwell family climbs the stairs to bed. The children are so tired they can barely keep their eyes open. Even the adults are yawning. It's been a long evening, a long day, a long season. But it was good. It was, everyone agrees, a wonderful 12th night. The next morning, January the 7th, brings a return to normalcy. Or almost normalcy. There's still the matter of the greenery. Remember the superstition? All the Christmas decorations must be taken down on or before 12th night. To leave them up longer is to invite bad luck for the coming year. So January the 7th is spent taking down decorations. James and Tom go through the house, removing the garlands from the staircase, the sprigs of holly from above the doorways, the ivy from around the picture frames. They gather it all into baskets and carry it outside. The tradition, in some households, was to burn the greenery, to have a bonfire in the yard or the garden, to consume in flames all these reminders of Christmas, to send them up in smoke as the season ended. The Hartwells opt for burning. It's a practical choice as well as a traditional one. The greenery is too dried out now to be useful for anything else. Better to burn it and be done with it. So a pile is built in the stable yard, and James sets it alight. The holly and ivy and rosemary burn well once they get going, crackling and popping, sending up clouds of aromatic smoke. The mistletoe, being more succulent, takes longer to catch, but eventually it too burns. The children come out to watch the fire. There's something satisfying about it. About the way the flames consume the greenery that had been so carefully gathered and arranged just 2 weeks ago. It's an ending, a closing of the circle. The Christmas season, which began with bringing the greenery into the house, ends with burning it and releasing it back to the air as smoke. The kissing bough is taken down last. It's too large to fit through most doors, so it has to be partially disassembled first. The decorations are removed. The candles, most of them burned down to stubs now, are taken off. The ribbons are untied and saved because ribbon is expensive and can be reused. The apples and oranges, if they haven't been eaten, are given to the horses or to the pigs. And then the greenery itself is stripped from the frame, added to the pile in the yard, and burned. The bent wood frame is kept. It will be stored in the attic, waiting for next Christmas, when it will be brought down again and decorated again, continuing the cycle. By midday, all the greenery is gone, burned to ash and smoke. The house looks suddenly bare, suddenly ordinary. The walls that were so festooned with holly and ivy now show their plain paint or wallpaper. The rooms feel larger, emptier, without the Christmas decorations. But there's also a sense of relief. The house has been in a state of heightened activity for over a month now. From the first preparations in early December through the festivities of Christmas Day, through the constant round of visiting and entertaining, through the grand finale of Twelfth Night, it's been busy. Wonderful, but busy. And now it's done. Now there can be rest. The servants especially are glad for the return to normal rhythms. Mrs. Bridges is back to cooking everyday meals, simple and quick. No more elaborate feasts. Sarah is back to her regular cleaning routine. No more special preparations for guests. James and Tom are back to their usual outdoor work, which is actually easier in winter because there's less to do. The horses still need tending, but the garden is dormant. There's wood to chop and coal to bring in, but it's steady, manageable work, not the frantic activity of the Christmas season. The family too settles back into routine. Mr. Hartwell returns to his business concerns. There are accounts to review from the past year, plans to make for the coming year, decisions to be made about which fields will be planted with what crops, how much livestock to maintain, whether to invest in new equipment or make do with the old. Mrs. Hartwell picks up her needlework again. She has several projects ongoing. A set of pillowcases that she's embroidering for the guest bedroom. A sampler that Elizabeth is working on under her mother's supervision. There's mending to do, always mending. Stockings to darn. Shirts with frayed cuffs that need repairing. The children return to their lessons with the governess. After the freedom of the Christmas season, it feels restrictive to be back to studying Latin and history and arithmetic. But that's how it is. Christmas is a break from routine, but routine must return. January settles in, cold and grey. The days are short, the sun setting by late afternoon. The nights are long and dark. This is the depth of winter, the time when it feels like spring will never come. But people endure. They've endured countless winters before this one, and they'll endure countless winters after. That's just how life is in the 18th century. You take what comes. You find pleasure where you can, and you remember the brightness of Christmas through the dark months until spring arrives and brings with it a new kind of hope. But let's pause for a moment and think more deeply about these traditions we've been describing. The kissing bough, the 12th night cake, the 12 days of celebration. Where did they come from? What did they mean to the people who practiced them? Let's start with the kissing bough itself. This wasn't a Georgian invention. Its roots go back much further, into the medieval period and even before that. The use of evergreens in winter celebrations predates Christianity in England. The ancient Celts and the even more ancient peoples before them understood that evergreens, plants that stayed green through winter, had a kind of magic. They represented continuity, survival, the promise that life would return even in the deadest part of the year. When Christianity came to Britain, these old customs weren't entirely swept away. Instead, they were adapted, given Christian meanings, incorporated into the new religion. So the holly, which had been sacred to pre-Christian peoples, became associated with Christ's crown of thorns. Its red berries represented his blood. The ivy, which had been associated with the winter survival, became a symbol of eternal life through Christian faith. But underneath these Christian layers, the older meanings persisted. People brought evergreens into their homes because their ancestors had done so, because it felt right, because these green living things brought comfort in winter's bleakness. The specific religious meaning was secondary to the immediate, visceral rightness of having these plants indoors. The kissing bough itself seems to have developed from earlier traditions of hanging decorated branches or bundles of evergreens in houses. At some point, probably in the 17th or early 18th century, this evolved into the more elaborate circular construction we've been describing. And the association with kissing came from the mistletoe, which had its own ancient traditions. Mistletoe is a strange plant. It grows on trees, particularly on oaks, but it's not part of the tree. It's parasitic, drawing nutrients from its host. It stays green all winter when the oak trees themselves are bare. Its berries are white, waxy, almost ghostly. The ancient Druids considered it sacred, cutting it with golden sickles in elaborate ceremonies. When Romans occupied Britain, they brought their own associations with mistletoe. In Roman times, enemies who met beneath mistletoe were supposed to lay down their weapons and observe a truce. This evolved somehow into the idea that mistletoe was a place of peace, of friendship, of goodwill. And from there, it's not a huge leap to the idea of kissing beneath it. If it's a place where enemies can become friends, why not a place where friends can become lovers? By the Georgian period, the connection between mistletoe and kissing was well established. But it wasn't crude or lascivious. It was playful, formalized, hedged around with social rules. When a young man wanted to kiss a young lady, he couldn't just grab her and kiss her anywhere in the house. That would be inappropriate, scandalous. But if she stood beneath the kissing bough, if he plucked one of the berries from the mistletoe, then he had permission. He could kiss her on the cheek. A quick, socially acceptable kiss. and she couldn't refuse without being thought rude or prudish. It was a way of managing courtship, of allowing young people to show interest in each other without crossing the lines of propriety. And when all the berries were gone, when they'd all been plucked by eager young men throughout the evening, then the kissing was over. The bough had served its purpose. The Twelfth Night cake has its own complex history. The custom of having a special cake on Twelfth Night goes back to medieval times, possibly earlier. It's connected to the ancient Roman festival of Saturnalia, where social roles were temporarily reversed and a lord of misrule was chosen to preside over the festivities. The tradition of baking a bean or pea into the cake comes from these Roman roots. Whoever found the bean was king for a night. Whoever found the pea was queen. In medieval and early modern England, this tradition was particularly popular at court and in wealthy households. The Twelfth Night feast would feature an enormous cake, elaborately decorated with the bean and pea hidden inside. The king and queen of the feast would be crowned with elaborate paper crowns and would preside over games and entertainment. It was a way of bringing a bit of carnival, a bit of topsy-turvy fun into the formal world of aristocratic life. By the Georgian period, the tradition had trickled down through society. Middle-class families like the Hartwells could afford to have Twelfth Night cakes, though theirs wouldn't be as large or as elaborately decorated as those of the aristocracy. And the custom was dying out a bit even then. Some families stopped putting the bean and pea in the cake, finding the tradition old-fashioned or silly. But others kept it up, enjoying the playfulness of it, the momentary reversal, where someone ordinary became king or queen for an evening. Queen Victoria would eventually suppress the Twelfth Night celebrations during her reign. She found them too rowdy, too reminiscent of the kind of lower-class merrymaking that didn't fit with her vision of respectable middle-class Christmas. The Twelfth Night cake was gradually replaced by the Christmas cake we know today, and the Twelfth Night party itself became less common. But in the Georgian period, it was still the high point of the season. Let's think too about the broader context of Georgian Christmas. What did Christmas mean in 18th century England? How was it different from Christmas today? One big difference was the lack of commercialization. There were no department stores with elaborate Christmas displays, no advertisements for Christmas shopping, no pressure to buy. Gifts were exchanged, yes, but they were usually handmade or practical. A pair of gloves, a book, a piece of jewelry if you were wealthy. The focus wasn't on accumulating things, but on spending time together, on the social and religious aspects of the season. Another difference was the extended nature of the celebration. Remember, Christmas in the Georgian era meant the 12 days from December the 25th to January the 6th. And really it stretched even longer, from St. Nicholas Day on December the 6th through to Plough Monday on the first Monday after Twelfth Night. That's over a month of celebration, albeit at varying levels of intensity. This was possible because of the agrarian nature of society. Winter was the slow time on farms. The harvest was in. The fields were dormant. There wasn't much outdoor work that needed doing except the daily care of livestock. So people had time to visit each other, time to feast and play games and just be together. The Industrial Revolution would change this. Factory workers couldn't take a month off for Christmas. The machines didn't stop running just because it was a holiday. But in the 1780s, in rural England, that month-long Christmas was still possible for many people. The religious aspect of Christmas was still central, in a way it isn't always today. Church attendance on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day was nearly universal. The Christmas story, the birth of Christ, was the reason for the season in a very real sense. Yes, there were secular pleasures. The feasting, the games, the kissing under the mistletoe. But these were wrapped around a religious core. You went to church. You heard the nativity story. You said your prayers. And then you went home and had your feast and your fun. There was also more of a sense of social obligation. The wealthy had responsibilities to the poor. It was expected that you would give to charity at Christmas, that you would be generous to your servants, that you would perhaps invite some of the less fortunate to share in your feast. This wasn't pure altruism. It was part of the social compact, part of what held the hierarchical Georgian society together. The poor knew their place, but the wealthy had obligations. And Christmas was a time when those obligations were particularly felt. In many parishes, there would be a Christmas dole. The local squire or the parish vestry would distribute food or money to the poor of the parish. Bread, cheese, a bit of meat perhaps, a few coins. It wasn't much, but it was expected. It was tradition. And for the poorest families, it might make the difference between a meagre Christmas and no Christmas at all. There were also the mumming plays. These were traditional folk dramas performed by groups of men who would go from house to house, especially in rural areas. The plays had stock characters. St. George, the dragon, the doctor who could bring dead people back to life. The performances were crude, often improvised, but they were entertaining. And after the performance, the mamas would be given food and drink and perhaps a few coins. The Hartwells, living in a moderately prosperous household, would have had mamas visit at some point during the 12 days. They would have come to the kitchen door, announced themselves, been invited in to perform in the kitchen or servants' hall. The servants would have watched, laughing at the familiar jokes and the slapstick violence. And then Mrs. Hartwell would have given them cold meat and bread and ale. And Mr. Hartwell would have given them a shilling or two to divide among themselves. And the mamas would have moved on to the next house, spreading their particular form of Christmas cheer through the village. All of these traditions, the kissing bough, the 12th night cake, the mamas, the church services, the visiting and feasting, they all combined to create the texture of Georgian Christmas. It was a time that was both familiar and special, rooted in ancient customs but also shaped by the specific concerns and sensibilities of the 18th century. Let's imagine one more scene, a smaller, quieter one. It's late January now. The Christmas season is well and truly over. The greenery has been burned. The house is back to its normal appearance. The routines of everyday life have reasserted themselves. It's evening. The family's gathered in the drawing room, as they are most evenings. Mr. Hartwell is reading the newspaper. Mrs. Hartwell is working on her needlework. The children are occupied with various activities. Mary is reading a novel, one of the ones from the circulating library that her mother subscribed to. Elizabeth is practicing her pianoforte, the same simple pieces over and over, trying to get them perfect. George is playing with the wooden soldiers on the floor, staging elaborate battles that only he understands. Outside, it's snowing. Not heavily, just a gentle fall of soft flakes that drift down through the darkness. You can see them when you look out the window, illuminated by the light from the house, swirling and dancing in the air before settling on the ground. There's a quietness to this evening, a contentment, The excitement of Christmas is past, but there's no sadness about that. The season served its purpose. It brought light and warmth and joy into the dark midwinter. It strengthened social bonds. It gave everyone something to look forward to and something to remember. And now that it's over, there's a rightness to that too, a sense of completion. Mrs. Hartwell looks up from her needlework and glances around the room, her husband absorbed in his reading, her daughters occupied, her son playing peacefully, the fire burning steadily in the grate, the snow falling outside, everything as it should be. In a few months, spring will come. The days will lengthen. The world will turn green again. There will be planting and growth and all the busy work of summer. And then autumn, harvest, the preparing for another winter. And then, far in the future, December will come around again, and they'll bring in the greenery and make another kissing bough and have another Twelfth Night cake. The cycle will continue, as it has continued for generations, as it will continue for generations more. But right now, in this moment, there's just a peaceful evening in January, just a family together, just a quiet satisfaction of the ordinary made special by the warmth and light and love that fills this room. Before we finish for tonight, let's talk a bit about what happened to these Georgian Christmas traditions. Why don't we make kissing boughs anymore? Why don't we have Twelfth Night cakes? What changed? The short answer is Victoria. Queen Victoria and her husband Prince Albert, as we've mentioned, popularized the Christmas tree in the 1840s. Once the royal family was pictured around their tree, once that image was published in newspapers and periodicals, Christmas trees became the fashionable thing to have. And Christmas trees, you have to understand, required space and attention. They took over the center of the room the way kissing boughs once did. They became the focal point of Christmas decoration. The kissing bough couldn't compete. It seemed old-fashioned, too rural, too associated with the previous generation. Young Victorian families wanted trees, not boughs. And so the tradition faded, though it persisted in some rural areas into the early 20th century. But by the time we get to the mid-Victorian period, the kissing bough was largely a memory. The mistletoe tradition survived, but in a reduced form. Instead of elaborate boughs, people just hung small sprigs of mistletoe in doorways. The tradition of kissing under the mistletoe persisted, but it became more casual, less formalized. You didn't have to pluck a berry. You just had to catch someone under the mistletoe, and you could steal a kiss. The rules loosened as the structure of the kissing bough disappeared. Twelfth Night, as a major celebration, also faded in the Victorian period. Victoria, as mentioned, didn't much like the raucous Twelfth Night parties. They smacked of the kind of working-class merrymaking that the Victorian middle class was trying to distance itself from. The Victorian ideal of Christmas was more refined, more domestic, more focused on the family unit rather than on large gatherings. So Twelfth Night parties became less common. The Twelfth Night cake was replaced by the Christmas cake, which was eaten on Christmas Day itself rather than saved for Twelfth Night. The Christmas season shortened, compressing itself from 12 days down to essentially 2, Christmas Day and Boxing Day. And then it was over, back to work, back to normal life. This Victorian reshaping of Christmas is so successful, so total, that most of us today think of Victorian Christmas as traditional Christmas. When we imagine a traditional historical Christmas, We picture Dickens's Christmas Carol with its goose and its pudding and its Tiny Tim. We picture Queen Victoria and Albert around their Christmas tree. We don't picture Georgian kissing boughs or Twelfth Night cakes, because those traditions were already fading by the time Victoria's reign was well underway. But for a while, for a few generations in the 18th and very early 19th centuries, Christmas looked different. It felt different. It had its own customs and rhythms and meanings. And those customs, even though they're mostly forgotten now, are part of the long, complex history of Christmas in England. It's worth remembering them. Worth taking a moment to think about the people who made kissing boughs with their own hands, who baked Twelfth Night cakes that took days to prepare, who burned their Christmas greenery on the day after Twelfth Night. These were real people with real lives, and their Christmas traditions were as meaningful to them as ours are to us. They're gone now, those Georgian families, the Hartwells and the Thorntons, and all the others we've imagined tonight. Gone for 200 years and more. Their houses might still stand, some of them, repurposed into modern homes or museums. Their furniture might be in antique shops, their portraits in galleries. But the people themselves, with their hopes and fears and joys and sorrows, they're dust now. Just memories. Just stories we tell ourselves about how Christmas used to be. But in telling those stories, we keep them alive in a way. We remember that Christmas has always been changing, evolving, adapting to new times and new sensibilities. The Georgian Christmas wasn't the medieval Christmas. The Victorian Christmas wasn't the Georgian Christmas. And our Christmas isn't the Victorian Christmas. Each generation makes Christmas its own, keeping some old traditions, discarding others, inventing new ones. And maybe, somewhere far in the future, people will look back at our Christmas traditions and find them as quaint and curious as we find kissing boughs and Twelfth Night cakes. Maybe they'll wonder why we decorated trees in our houses, or why we gave each other so many presents, or why we ate particular foods. And maybe they'll try to imagine what it felt like, what it meant, to celebrate Christmas in the early 21st century. The cycle continues. Christmas past, Christmas present, Christmas future. All connected, all part of the same long tradition of marking the darkest time of year with light and warmth and human connection. Let's drift now into some of the smaller details of Georgian Christmas. The little things that don't make it into the history books, but that would have been part of everyday experience. Think about the cold. We've mentioned it several times, but really think about it. A Georgian house in winter was cold. Yes, there were fires in the main rooms, but fires only heat the area immediately around them. The rest of the room remains cold. And once you move away from the main living areas, into bedrooms or corridors or service areas, there's often no heat at all. People dressed for this cold. Multiple layers of clothing, wool next to the skin, more wool over that. Shawls and coats worn indoors. Nightcaps worn to bed to keep your head warm. Bed warmers, long-handled metal pans filled with hot coals from the fire. Run between the sheets to take the chill off before you got into bed. In the Hartwell house, on a typical January night, you'd go upstairs to your bedroom carrying a candle. The staircase would be cold, your breath visible in the air. Your bedroom would be colder still. You'd undress as quickly as possible, teeth chattering, and put on your nightclothes. Someone, probably Sarah, would have warmed your bed for you with the warming pan. But that warmth would fade quickly. You'd get into bed and pile on the blankets, as many as you could bear the weight of. You'd curl up, trying to keep as much of your body heat trapped as possible, and eventually, you'd sleep. In the morning, getting out of that warm cocoon of blankets into the cold room was an act of will. You'd dress by candlelight, or by the grey pre-dawn light if you were up early enough. Your clothes would be cold. The water in the pitcher on the washstand might have a skin of ice on it if the night was particularly cold. You'd wash quickly, just face and hands, not a full bath. Baths were rare in Georgian England anyway, maybe once a week if that, and certainly not in winter if you could avoid it. And then you'd go downstairs to the kitchen, where there would be warmth. Mrs. Bridges would have had the fire going for an hour or more by the time you came down. The kitchen would be the warmest room in the house, and everyone would gravitate there. The servants because they worked there, the family because that's where the warmth was. Class distinctions blurred a bit in the face of cold. Everyone huddled near the fire, warming their hands, grateful for the heat. Food in winter was different too. This was before refrigeration, obviously, but it was also before reliable long-distance transportation of fresh food. In December and January, you ate what could be stored. Root vegetables, turnips and carrots and parsnips kept in a root cellar. Apples, if they'd been carefully stored and if they hadn't gone bad. Preserved foods, jams and jellies and pickles made during the harvest season. Dried beans and peas. Salted or smoked meats. Cheese. Fresh meat could be had if you could afford it, but it had to be eaten quickly before it spoiled. In the coldest weather, you could hang it in an unheated room, and the cold would keep it for a few days. But in milder weather, meat would go bad fast. So when the Hartwells had their Christmas turkey, that was a real luxury. Fresh meat, lots of it, more than could be eaten in one meal, so there would be cold turkey for days afterward. Used in pies, in soups, in sandwiches. Nothing was wasted. Fresh milk was available if you had a cow, or if you had a neighbour with a cow who would sell you milk. But milk spoiled quickly, so you used it fast or you made it into cheese or butter. The Hartwells probably didn't keep their own cow. They'd buy milk from a local farmer, have it delivered every few days. And they'd be careful with it, using it sparingly, not wanting to waste a drop. Eggs in winter were scarce. Chickens don't lay much in winter. The short days and cold weather slow down their production. So eggs were precious, used carefully, saved for special dishes. The eggs that went into the Twelfth Night cake would have been accumulated over days, possibly weeks. These small practical details shaped the way Christmas was experienced. The cold made the fires and the warm food more precious. The scarcity of fresh ingredients made the Christmas feast more special. The darkness, with night falling by 4 in the afternoon, made candlelight more important, more beautiful. Everything was more immediate, more keenly felt, because comfort and plenty couldn't be taken for granted. Let's think about the servants for a bit. We've mentioned them in passing, but they're central to understanding Georgian Christmas. Without servants, a household like the Hartwells couldn't function the way it did. And Christmas, with all its extra work, highlighted the role of servants even more than usual. Sarah, the housemaid, was probably up at 5 or 6 every morning, even on Christmas Day. Her first job was to clean out and relight the fires that had been banked overnight. She'd take out the ashes, lay new kindling and coal, coax the fire back to life. She'd do this in every main room of the house. It was dirty work. Her hands would be black with soot and ash. Her clothes, even with an apron, would get dirty. Then there was water to fetch. The Hartwells had a pump in the yard, so at least Sarah didn't have to walk to a well. But she still had to pump water into buckets and carry those heavy buckets into the house. Water for cooking, for washing, for cleaning. Gallons and gallons of it over the course of a day. And in winter, that water was freezing cold. Her hands would be chapped and sore from constant exposure to cold water. Then there was cleaning. Sweeping the floors, dusting the furniture, washing the windows, scrubbing the steps. Emptying and washing chamber pots, because there was no indoor plumbing and everyone used chamber pots at night. This was Sarah's life, day in and day out, with Christmas bringing only extra work, not rest. Mrs. Bridges, the cook, had a slightly higher status as a skilled worker, but her life was also one of constant labor. She was on her feet all day in the kitchen. Cooking was physical work in the Georgian era. You had to lift heavy pots, stir thick mixtures, knead dough until your arms ached. You worked over a hot fire, even in summer. But especially at Christmas, when so much cooking needed to be done. And cooking was skilled work. You had to know how to regulate the heat of your fire, because there were no temperature gauges on Georgian ovens. You judged the heat by experience, by feel, by the color of the coals. You had to know how long different foods took to cook, and you had to juggle multiple dishes at once. The Christmas dinner, with its multiple courses, was a feat of timing and coordination. Mrs. Bridges deserved every bit of respect she got for pulling it off successfully year after year. James, the footman, had different duties. He did the heavier outdoor work, tending to the horses and the stable. He brought in coal and wood for the fires. He drove the carriage when the family needed to go somewhere. He served at table when there were guests. He helped with whatever needed helping with. And young Tom was learning. At 12, he was at that age where he was old enough to work, but still learning his trade. He helped James mostly, doing the simpler tasks, the fetching and carrying. In a few years, if he stayed with the Hartwells, he might become a footman himself, or he might move on to another household, looking for better opportunities. Servants were mobile in Georgian England. They moved from position to position, always trying to improve their circumstances. The relationship between the Hartwells and their servants was complex. It wasn't friendship exactly, though there was often genuine affection. It was more like a formalized family relationship. The Hartwells were responsible for their servants' welfare, and in return, the servants gave their labor and their loyalty. At Christmas, this relationship was reinforced through the giving of gifts, through allowing the servants some time off, through sharing, in a limited way, in the festive abundance. But there was always a line. The servants ate in their own hall, not with the family. They had their own celebrations, separate from the family's celebrations. They were part of the household, but they weren't part of the family. That distinction was crucial. It maintained the social order, the hierarchy that Georgian society depended on. When we imagine Georgian Christmas, we need to imagine it from both sides of that line. The Hartwells' experience of Christmas was one of relative ease and plenty. They got to enjoy the feasts, the parties, the leisurely visiting. The servants' experience was one of hard work, punctuated by brief moments of rest and small luxuries. Both were part of the same Christmas, the same household, but their experiences were very different. Let's talk about one more tradition, one we haven't discussed much yet. The Yule log. This is one of those customs that has roots going back into the pre-Christian past, way back before Christianity even reached Britain. The basic idea of the Yule log is simple. On Christmas Eve, or sometimes on Christmas Day itself, you bring into your house the largest log you can manage. Not just any log, but a special one. Often it was oak, though any hardwood would do. You'd haul this log to your fireplace with some ceremony, often with the whole family helping. The children might ride on it as it was dragged through the house, turning it into a game. Once you got the log to the fireplace, you'd push it in and you'd light it using a piece of the previous year's Yule log, which had been saved for this purpose. The Yule log was supposed to burn for the entire 12 days of Christmas. Not continuously, but you'd keep it smouldering, banking it at night, coaxing it back to flames in the morning. It was bad luck if the Yule log went out entirely before Twelfth Night. The Yule log tradition is rooted in fire worship, in the ancient human need to bring light and warmth into the darkest part of the year. The winter solstice, December 21st or 22nd, is the longest night, the point at which the sun is at its weakest. Ancient peoples feared, on some level, that the sun might not return, that the darkness might win. So they made fires, big fires, as a form of sympathetic magic. By creating light, they encouraged the sun to come back, to grow stronger, to bring spring. Christianity adapted this pagan tradition, as it adapted so many others. The Yule log became associated with the light of Christ, the light that came into the world to dispel darkness. But the older meaning persisted underneath. People brought in Yule logs because their ancestors had done so, because it felt right, because Christmas without a Yule log wasn't quite Christmas. In the Hartwell household, the Yule log tradition would have been observed, though perhaps not as elaborately as in some families. They had a smaller, more urban life than pure country folk. Their fireplace, while good-sized, wasn't the enormous hearth you'd find in a medieval manor house or a large farmhouse. So their Yule log would be correspondingly smaller, manageable by James and Mr. Hartwell working together. They would have chosen the log on Christmas Eve, probably from wood that had been cut earlier and left to season. It would have been dragged into the house, with the children helping in the way children do, mostly getting in the way but enjoying themselves. And it would have been lit with a piece of last year's Yule log, carefully preserved in the stable for just this purpose. The log would have burned through Christmas Day, a large, glowing presence in the drawing room fireplace. And then it would have been banked each night and rekindled each morning, keeping the continuity of the Yule fire going through the 12 days. On 12th night, after the party was over, after the guests had gone home, someone would have taken what was left of the Yule log and moved it to the side. A piece of it, one of the unburned ends, would be cut off and saved for next year. The rest would be used as firewood. Over the next few days, burned up gradually until nothing remained but ash. There are superstitions associated with the Yule log. It was bad luck if the log went out before 12th night, as mentioned. But there were good luck aspects too. The ashes of the Yule log were thought to have protective properties. Some people would scatter them in the garden to ensure a good growing season. Others would keep a bit of the ash inside the house to ward off lightning or fire. Still, others believed that the ash could cure various ailments. These superstitions seem silly to us now, We know that ash is just ash, burned wood, nothing magical about it. But to Georgian people, the line between the natural and the supernatural was less clear. Things could be lucky or unlucky. Objects could have power. The ashes of a fire that had burned through the 12 days of Christmas. A fire that represented continuity and tradition and the turning of the year. Those ashes might very well have special properties. It wasn't irrational to think so. It was just a different way of understanding the world. We're reaching the end of our time together tonight. We've been wandering through Georgian Christmas for hours now, imagining the Hartwells and their household, thinking about kissing boughs and Twelfth Night cakes and Yule logs. We've tried to understand what Christmas meant in 1780-something, how it felt, how it was experienced by real people living real lives. The picture we've painted is incomplete, of course. We've focused on a particular type of household, moderately prosperous, neither rich nor poor. We haven't talked much about how the very wealthy celebrated Christmas in their grand manor houses, with dozens of guests and elaborate entertainments. We haven't talked about how the very poor celebrated, or tried to celebrate, with little food and less comfort, making do with what they could manage. We've also focused on England, ignoring Wales and Scotland and Ireland, where Christmas traditions were different in various ways. We've ignored the city experience, how Christmas was celebrated in London, or Bristol, or Manchester, which would have been different from the rural experience we've imagined. But even with all these limitations, even with all the things we haven't covered, hopefully you have a sense now of what Georgian Christmas was like. Hopefully you can imagine it. The cold and the darkness, and the fires burning bright against both. The greenery brought in on Christmas Eve, filling the house with its sharp scent. The kissing bough hanging in the drawing room, its candles flickering. The Twelfth Night cake, with its white icing and its hidden bean and pea. The visiting and the feasting and the games. The way time stretched out. 12 days instead of 1 or 2, giving space for celebration. And hopefully you can imagine the people. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell going through their daily routines, punctuated by moments of festivity. Their children, excited about Christmas, but also learning the social obligations that came with their position. The servants, working hard, but also participating in their own way in the season's celebrations. All of them connected to each other, to their community, to the long tradition of marking the darkest time of year with light and warmth and human connection. These people are gone now, long gone. But their traditions persisted for a while, evolved, changed, merged with new traditions, and eventually transformed into the Christmas we know today. We don't make kissing boughs anymore, but we hang mistletoe. We don't have 12th night cakes, but we have Christmas cakes. We don't burn Yule logs in our fireplaces, though some of us watch Yule log videos on our televisions, which is a strange modern echo of the old tradition. Everything changes. Everything stays the same. Christmas past, Christmas present, Christmas future. All part of one long story. One long tradition of humans, trying to bring light into darkness, trying to create warmth and connection in the cold, lonely depths of winter. And now it's late, or early, depending on how you think about these things. We've been together for a long time tonight. You and I, wandering through history. Hopefully you're feeling relaxed. Hopefully your mind is quiet. Hopefully, the gentle rhythm of these stories has lulled you into that peaceful state between waking and sleeping. If you haven't fallen asleep yet, that's okay. There's no rush. Just let yourself be. Let your mind drift. Think about Georgian parlours and kissing boughs if you want. Or think about nothing at all. Just breathe. Just be. The world will still be there tomorrow. Your worries and concerns and obligations will still be there. But right now, in this moment, you can let them go. You can rest. You can allow yourself this peace. The Hartwells are asleep in their beds, in their cold Georgian house that exists only in our imaginations now. Sarah and James and Mrs. Bridges and little Tom are asleep in the servants' quarters. The fire in the drawing room has burned low, but is still glowing, still giving off warmth. Outside, the winter night continues, stars wheeling overhead, frost settling on the ground. Everything is as it should be. Everything is at rest. And you can rest too. Sleep well. And if you wake in the night, remember the kissing bough hanging in the center of the room. Its candles out now, but still there. Still marking that space as special. Remember the 12th night cake, eaten and gone but remembered. Remember the 12 days of Christmas, that long, slow celebration that our ancestors knew. And let that slowness, that gentleness, carry you back into sleep. Good night. Until next time.